Hi everyone, this one is going to be all about lines. So as you probably read in the description, we as designers, whether you're an industrial designer, entertainment designer, concept artist, concept designer, illustrator, engineer even, architect, anybody who draws to communicate ideas and designs, uses lines when they draw. That's obvious. But how they use them and the type of lines vary quite a bit, even within one sketch. You see in my description how many I listed. Those are almost all of those are probably presented here in this little sketch. So let's cover a few, and I just grabbed a whole bunch of my recent sketches, and I'm going to hold them up here, point out some of the lines, and then demo when needed, but really this is going to be probably a lot like the line weight tutorial that's on my Gumroad site now. This one's probably a lot of look, listen, and study, and then go try it for yourself. So let's start with cut and shut. Cut and shut are basically the same. Depends where you are, which one you use. But a cut line and a shut line are usually in reference to doors, things that open and close on an object. And I'm using vehicles here because that's what I like to draw a lot, but it doesn't mean you have to use vehicles. Here's a bunch of helmets, so you can have the same sort of things here. So a big cut line or a shut line would be, let's take, well, obviously around the visor in this case. Whoops. I'm zoomed in quite a bit so I can try to show these small sketches, and some of the lines are very, very light. But that would be like a cut line around here, and a cut line would be where a panel or something is removed. And so it also can be called a part line and an assembly line. But cut and shut are usually specifics to panels that rotate or hinge or open. So things like doors. Then part and assembly lines are sort of one and the same. Part and assembly lines are what I just showed on the helmet, and those are usually where you have material changes, or where you have like this material will be different than this one, or where you have a need from a manufacturing standpoint to cut something apart in order to put it together. So what I mean by that is if we had a, let's just draw a really basic shape. If we had this basic shape, okay, something like that, and this is rolling back under. And the back of this was, let's say it was screwed onto a wall. So this panel back here, okay. And then this guy here had to be removable to access what was on the wall portion. So somewhere you need a line, there can be a line right at the edge, but you could also come back in here, right, and put a part line. And so that's left over. After you assemble it, you might still see that line right there. And then you might even want to make it a design detail and make it thick. You might want to give it some shape as it rolls, as it goes up towards the top here. So there's a lot of variation you can do, and that gets more into styling, but what I want to cover in this tutorial is just helping you to understand the variety of lines, understand what they are, so when you talk with a designer or you're talking amongst your colleagues, that you understand sort of the vernacular of what somebody's talking about when they say a cut line or a shut line, a part, contour, etc. So cut line, shut line, think of that as panels that hinge, doors that open, trunk lids, things like that. Part and assembly, those are usually reserved for manufacturing or material changes. So there's a material change maybe between these two panels, or I need access in here, or it had to be made a certain way because this was rigid and welded to part of the frame, and then this one is bolt-on, for instance, and those create a part line or an assembly line. There are also some up in here. Let's see if I can find any more. Let's just look at another sketch. Okay, there aren't a lot on this one here. I would probably, this one right here, this is a part line that runs all the way around and then back up. And you see it has fasteners on it, bolting it into place. So there's my fasteners, and then maybe there's some hidden fasteners. It notches in and then goes forward, and then it's held at the top, and it's invisible fasteners at the bottom. So that would be a part line or an assembly line. Okay, this one, there's a shut line right here, or a cut line for the door right there, and that goes up and over. So that entire glass door and painted area opens. Then I've got one here, a big one, that goes all the way around. Get this up centered a bit more. It gets it all the way up and around, comes down and down to there. That looks like a manufacturing nightmare, actually. There probably needs to be a few more lines in this. Maybe here would be a good spot to put a line, breaking that a little bit into some pieces that are manageable that could be made in that sort of size and then assembled. So probably another one back here might be a good idea. Or they could be assembled and then, finished the edges. So this could be parts put together, and then you could weld and sand those, grind them flush. Then this panel could drop in. Here's another part and assembly line. Okay, let's look what's up next. Section line. So a section line, I see a couple right here. There are a couple on this one as well, and a couple here. Section lines are when you have a shape. Let's draw a little quick shape. So a section line, if I have a center line like this, I'm just going to draw across it. So if you have my book, How to Draw, you should all know what section lines are. And they are lines that cut either an X, Y, or Z axis. And what I mean by that is that you have an axis. When you define three-dimensional space, you have three axes. And so depending how you want to label them, and depending where you work, it can oftentimes be labeled differently. But the classic one is Z, it's looking down, and then X, if this is my front and back of my object, let's call it like this, front and back, then this would be my X would be across, like so, and Y would be lengthwise. So if I have a shape, let's just draw a top view. So that would be my Z axis line right here, and this would be called my Z plane. And then on the center line, because I'm looking this way, that would be my X. Sorry, should be looking the other, well, it doesn't really matter. X and Y, they're all interchangeable, to be honest. Because you'll find computer programs flip these all the time. So Z plane, Y plane would be here, X would be the sections that go this way. So they cut across and then they're viewed from the front. So if I have a section like so, and so those would be my X sections. And the important thing to note here is that these would be section lines on the surface. So those would be X section lines. This center line here is a Y, and the top view on the ground here is a Z. And if I wanted to put another section through here, if I draw parallel to the ground, and then I project that out in perspective at each one of my X sections, what I end up with are points, a point on my Y, a point on each of the X sections, and I can get another Z-plane cut in here. Likewise, if I ever want to put another X, I draw another vertical, come out in perspective, slice it. I have another point now I could use here, and I draw another X section like so. So those are called XYZ sections, or just section lines. But the key thing to remember is that they typically, section lines, are cutting in an XYZ, so it's a 90, 90, 90 right here. So in top view, here's the top view of our shape. They're cutting straight across in 90 degrees. In side view, something like this, they cut 90 degrees like so to a horizontal. And then in front view, let's see, let's draw the front view over here. They look like this, okay? And then that's 90 degrees as well. So this section that's going here and slicing to give us that curve. So section lines are cutting 90, 90, 90. And there's a difference between a section line and a contour line, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But this would be a section line right here. So that's like an X section that's just giving me a little bit more information about the general form right through here. And they're usually drawn very, very lightly. Here you can see one on the center line. That will be a Y. Let's look back to this guy. This one has them. They're very light, but they're right here. There's a couple little ones that shows me a little cut under. A couple more up in here that tells me that plane is leaning back. And let's see. This part line actually is also like a section line because it's cutting straight across the shape in top view. So that would be like an X section line that's also a part line. There's one here, right there. See, and I just put it in really lightly just to remind myself a little notation of what that shape is. Because when you're doing a line drawing, you're not using value. You can do a little cross-hatching here and there to indicate a little bit of value change, but usually you're just adding small, very light lines. So here's section line, section line, section, 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 section through here and up. Another one there, and then you'll see those are all lighter than the part line. The part line's a little bit more crisp, a little bit darker. Here's my Y for my center line. Okay, here's a whole bunch of section lines on this one. You see them all through here. Those are all X. The center line is here, that's my Y, up and around. I don't really have any, I have this you could call a little bit of a Z if it was horizontal to the ground plane. Now, the difference between a section line and a contour line is that they kind of look the same in a drawing, except that contour lines don't necessarily have to be XYZ. And that's how I usually think of the two being different. Let's look at this one. So this one, there's another little X right through here. There's a cut line there for the door. Okay, so when I think about contour lines, this is how I think of them. Let's see, probably the simplest example would be to draw like a curving pipe section. Like this. Now, if I had an XYZ, first I'd need to know where is this in space in XYZ. This might be my X, and then as it's curving, this is going to be really strange cutting an X across here because it's going to make a big ellipse. That's not very helpful when we're drawing, we're trying to describe the shape. So if this is a pipe, let's say this is the inside, we're looking at the end, contour lines would actually wrap and they could radially describe this surface. So it's kind of like I had a straight pipe that had these stripes on it, or these X sections originally, and then I bent it around a corner, and all of those contour lines bent with it. So those I would call contour lines, and that's if you're doing cross-hatching or something. If we have a little panel, let's see, let's draw a corner. That might be good. Draw like a corner like this. This is an X here, top view. Okay, so this is coming like this one's coming like this, then down here is my top view, so I have a radius on that corner. This would be another X, for instance. Right through this corner, if you wanted to show more, a contour line right here would be straight, and then it might radiate like this. A lot of times they're very radial. If you think of a globe like this, we see the center there, and there's the bottom. we might have an XYZ that, let's get it a little bit more in perspective here. So that would cut, go through the bottom, then back up the back side. So there's one, we'd have a Z, we'd have another one going the other way. But then if you wanted to continue to show them, they would be like the latitude, longitude lines, right? So they would actually radiate all the way around. So they're not confined or constrained by the XYZ. Just think of them, you can sort of place them anywhere. Now they can get a little tricky because it's hard to know where they're going in perspective. So I usually try to err on the side when I'm describing shapes for myself. I err on the side of using XYZ first and foremost. But then if I want to show something else that's a contour, this is, let's see where would be a good spot here. This is a pretty simple shape. You can get away with doing sort of XYZ on all of that. So let's see if I can find a little contour here. More XYZ, more shut lines, more of the basic stuff. Here's a nice section line. So as this rolls away around to the other side, I could have lines that come down like this, cut back, then go in and come back out. They might not necessarily relate to the center line, but they'll help to show the form. So what I mean by that is I could have a curve like this, and then I could have this part tuck in. My scoop could go like this, like that, and then in here's the hole, like this. So I want to define a form there just with line work. So an X section might start to do this. Okay, it gets to here and then it's going to go back underneath and it's going to go down, curve, come back out, and then do something like that. That might be an X, but as it starts to roll around, the X through here is going to get really long and hard to plot and not very helpful. So you might start to just bring lines down like this and have them cut back, come down, a little fillet, and then come back out. So it's kind of another X section, but it's been twisted. And that's what I would call a contour line. So if I wanted to show that little fillet running around there, that's how I would do my contours to show that in perspective as it's wrapping. So here it might look like this, then getting straighter, straighter, and almost dead straight through here, starts to turn back the other way. So those would be contour lines. A little different than section lines, but effectively they're trying to communicate the same thing. Trying to communicate form with line work. Now what you find a lot in my own drawings and other people's drawings is that when you draw just with line and you're using sections to show form, you don't have value there to make the drawing or the surfacing look interesting. So as a result, there's a tendency, looks like I maybe missed a little line right there, just fix that up. There might be a tendency to add a lot of extra lines, both in the form of cross-hatching and in the form of section and contour and cut lines. The cut lines will be there, of course, later when you add value to it, but this one right here might not be. Maybe that's my door cut here, but this is really just to tell me the form. And if that's the case, it's a little bit too heavy for my preference. I'd rather have lines about this weight to show me the form, or like this. Here's an example of those little contour lines. That's showing me the little fillet through here. So there's a hierarchy to the line weight of the different line types. So, don't be afraid to put on the lines to show the extra forms. Just know when you go to value, you're probably going to be able to get rid of a lot of those and show the form with the value change and not have to show it with the line anymore. But when you're only doing a line drawing, that's why we need all these different line types to show the shape. Okay, this one, where am I on my list here? So we've covered cut, shut, part, assembly, contour, section. Okay, let's talk about design and graphic lines. So design lines they'd also be a brake line. A brake line, not as in stop your vehicle, but as in form change. They could be lines that are soft. So this is a soft line through here. This is also a soft line, but it still creates a line that I can draw. And so as a result, I want to show it, but I want people to understand, oh, it's a soft line. So that's why I use a very, very light stroke and just put a little bit of multiple lines right next to each other. And even tapering, so it's a little sharper here than it is here. So here it gets a little bit wider with those lines, and here a little bit sharper. Here you can even do it with a fillet. So this maybe lead us into fillets and radii. Where am I? So I'm on design and graphic. Okay, so those would be design lines. Let me find a different one. I'll just draw an example. Okay, if I have, let's say, the side of a car, like this. All right, get it in frame. All right, let's say we've got a side of a car, far side wheels a little bit, and we have a roof line. We'll have a door cut. Okay. Now this door cut would have a cut line. That cut line might continue up into the wheel well, come back, turn, and then go up, okay, into this glass for the pillar line. Now, design line might be right out in here, sort of a continuation of this line. It's not a cut line. It can fade and stop. It's actually, if this is stamped or molded or even cast parts, think of it as a design line. It's just to draw your attention, add a little bit of emphasis to an area, and then they can wash out. So design line might be something like, if we had a little fender sticking out here, might lightly draw a line like this. It's not a cut line, it's not a section, it's really just a radius, or in this case a radius, but it's a design line. I like to think of design lines as cutting into the shape though. So if I had the section there of that door, right, my cut line's coming along here. Let's give it a sharper radius and have it continue upward. Okay, my design line might continue here and just be molded or a detent, right? So it's kind of looks like the same size as a cut line, but the section through it goes inward and comes back out. So if I was going to draw that larger, be this sort of thing, maybe a little radius, and then here would be our design line. See them a lot on products where they're injection molded to add interest, and it's all the same surface. It's not a different material change. It's not for manufacturing. It's usually for style, so you could call it a style line or a design line. So that's what those are. Okay, moving on to graphic line. Okay, so graphic line, I would think of, let me find something that's, yeah, let's look at these spaceships. Or even this would work well. So a graphic line could be two things. It could define a region where you're planning to change the color or the value later. So maybe I want this to be a white helmet, but this element right up here on top is all going to be dark. So this line right here might define a difference in material or an actual part line, or it might just be a graphic line. So a graphic line here could be just making this and this different colors. Let's look for, there's some little design lines right there. Right, see where they define a little form change. Here's some contour lines up on here on that little fin shape that sticks up. Here's another cut line or part line between the two materials. Here is another, and so you could do it with a single line. Let's say it's supposed to be a tight fit on this, so these two parts come together and they're really tight, so they only define one small line. Here you can see that the gaps are quite large. And so there's a double line. So here there's a double line, here there's a double line, and that's letting us see a bit of a gap. Here's a couple little tick marks. You can barely see them. Those are little contour lines. Here you see the double line again around. More on design lines, another double line. So the double line, I'm going to jump ahead a little to the last on my description there, which are fillet and radius lines. Fillet and radius lines are lines that define the tangency of a radius or a fillet. So let's draw this as a profile. Okay, I'm going to draw it continuing into perspective. I don't really need those ends, but let's just draw here. Come down, out. Okay, if I wanted to take a router or a piece of sandpaper or a file and file off this sharp corner, right, I would create a radius. And this should all be review if you have my How to Draw book. This covers all of this sort of stuff. But I wanted to go a little deeper dive. I'm planning on this Gumroad channel, when I have the chance, to sort of take what we've explained in How to Draw and just go a little bit deeper, do a few more demos. So I'm going to sort of use that book as a guide for some future tutorials, sort of like a teaching textbook, and then I'll give you the lessons and the exercises to try alongside what you're reading in the book. Okay, so this would be a tangency line, this one and this one, and it would create a new section. So I just sanded it off there. So I would go here, here. So I have a new section. I have a radius, and the radius would continue down. So there would be my new silhouette or new outline. All of this little bit right there has all been cut away. Okay, so that is tangency line. Now the way we use those is that when you're doing a sketch and you want to show a radius, let's say I had a corner. If I was drawing something with radiuses, I would actually draw the corner of a box with double lines. And then over here it would turn and go the other way. Here it would turn and come down. And then I would probably see the silhouette like so. Might even see a little bit of a gap. Same here, turn this way, silhouette, radius, like that. And the back, of course, would just have a little radius like this. So I would draw it, and then the same for the bottom. Come across, down. Probably turns under too quick to see anything, but you would see the silhouette here. So that's the idea. So you would draw with double lines to show a radius from the very beginning. Instead of doing this, but you can do this, you can cut it off, doesn't matter. A fillet is the reverse. So a fillet would be a tangency line here, tangency line here, and then a curve that blends between those two tangencies, like that. Okay, and then we have our new silhouette here. The section coming down would do something like this. Doesn't reach the corner, comes back out. So that would be our radius and fillet lines. So what I like to do there, even in the little sketches, let's see if this one has any. Yeah, it has a little bit. This one has like a tapering fillet sort of here. Again, small, but here's a fillet in here. There's another one in there. And so you'll see I did a very light double line, and in fact I shaded the line just a little bit. Same here, this is a small radius. There's a little one there, a little fillet, so it's a double line. Here's a double line right here. It's tapering, so it tells me the fillet is actually getting wider at the bottom, tighter at the top. Let's see if I can find another one. Here's one here, drawn very lightly, but you'll see there's my tangency line here. Here's my other tangency line, and you'll see the section coming down, hits this, then curves, then hits another curve defining this bump on the other surface. And then you'll see I also put in a few little section or contour lines there between those double lines. So there's a double, here's a double. Don't really see any other ones quickly. Oh, there's one right here in side view. So there's a double line, there's contours. That would be a fillet again. Okay, here's another way to show them. You'll see right here, that's a little soft line, so there's a little radius to it, so I just let it fade out. Same through here is a little radius, again a lighter line. Okay, let me refer back to my list. Okay, we're through design, graphic, silhouette. Okay, so talk a little bit about silhouette lines. This is straight up old school figure drawing, and I think my other video talks about it a lot on how to think about line weight, so I won't talk about it that much here. But wherever you have overlaps on the outside of your shape, first, the general idea is that you darken the entire outline of your object. But I like to go a little bit more precise than that, and I like to bring those heavy lines on the outside, like right through here, and I like to pull them on the inside if there's an overlap in the shapes. So there's an overlap here, so this line stays heavy and then it fades because here it becomes one smooth surface. Here, this overlaps here, so this gets a little more weight, and then it fades and it disappears. Same here, this tells me this is sticking out above this area, and there's a little double line for a fillet. There's one for a radius, there's one for a fillet. And then let's look at this. This one was a tough sketch because I wanted to show that there were two of these, and they were overlapping. So you'll see the heaviest silhouettes are actually what's closest to us. So this is my silhouette line right here, and it defines that entire element, and then it fades into this wing. And then this one is sort of secondary, and these little arms that stick up to hold these little shapes on the outside, those overlap. Wherever they overlap, I put a heavier line. And then this one I wanted to make really light on the silhouette, so it was obviously not connected to this one. Same through here, there was a big overlap covering those little wing elements at the back, the tail. And so I put a big heavy line right there and then fade it. And then when it's clear here that there's nothing behind it, you can go a little bit lighter. Then heavy on this little arm, overlapping that engine. Heavy here as the wing sticks out over that element at the back. Heavy here. So that's what I would call overlapping and silhouettes. So silhouette's the outline. Here's another example. This is fully an interior line. This is a better example of overlapping. So overlapping, silhouette here is nice and strong to show the overall shape, but look at the heaviest line is right here in the entire sketch to set up that overlap. I wanted to be sure that this form, because I'm trying even here to use a little bit of value to accentuate that that's on top. There's a big hole there. Same here, this one's quite strong. This is quite strong. So overlapping shapes. The other thing I like to do a lot of is to make an object, especially a vehicle, look more alive in a lot of cases, and makes it look much more like a figure drawing, is to, along your silhouette's not just going to go here and include this and then there, but I like to look for overlaps. So this overlap is this fender on top of that one, on top of the hood, and just over the glass. So I'd like to take those, emphasize them, and then let them fade out. Here, I want to get this fender because it's sticking up, and there's a little fillet hidden behind there. So I want to emphasize the overlaps. And emphasizing the overlaps gives it a lot of life, and when you let those fade out back into the main surface, it becomes much more visually interesting. Here's an example. Overlap right here. So I'm riding along the silhouette, and then right here I want that to overlap there, and then it fades out. And then this one overlaps a little bit more. This one sticks out in front of that one. So you can see it over and over here. This one sticks out in front of this. So that's the silhouette and overlapping are very sort of go hand in hand. Sketch line. A sketch line is not something I do very often, but let's look at a difference. Let me see if I can find an example here. Okay, these are similar subjects. They're both vans. So a sketch line would be if I came back to this and I wanted to make it look, this one which I drew with like a high-tech pen, you see it's constant line weight. There's almost no silhouette changing in weight. So it looks a little bit static compared to, let's say, the ballpoint one, right? Which looks a bit more like pencil line. You see a lot of overlaps, you see a lot of weight change. That makes it a little bit more dynamic. And you'll see a lot of interior forms that are fading out. You'll see my door cut here working as a section line. So keep in mind that those cut lines and shut lines have to wrap across the surface, so they need to work like a section as they're wrapping across. So a sketch line would be more of a sketching technique where you took either a tight sketch. Let's say I had something like, I'll just draw a real quick little shape. So if I had a little spaceship thing, it's going like this, okay, and I thought that it was looking too tight when I was done. All the lines were nice and clean, but it was too static. Sketch lines would be literally coming back in and adding fake, extensions to these lines to make them look like they were sketched a little bit faster. And what it can do is it can provide a little bit of a loose feel to it. Also gives a sense of motion to the design, to the object, I should say. So I tend not to do it that often, but that's what I would call a sketch line. So it's not literally just a drawing line, it's actually trying to make something that was tighter look looser. Okay, a reflection, sketch overlapping. I think I'm down to reflection lines, which are kind of last. So reflection line is a bit trickier. I'll do a car sketch here. So a reflection line is really for the vehicle, or basically let's call them shiny surface designers. So people that design shiny objects, a lot of times when they're designing those shiny objects, they should be considering the reflection line. And what I mean by that is that if you look at a car, you will see a line that's created, let's say where the horizon line is reflected, or other parts of the environment. Typically though, designers will design with just a reflection of the horizon in mind. So I have a little signature car I do whenever I sign my books. It looks something roughly like this. Shut line here. Let's just make this go further up. Okay, so they might have a form change there, so this would be a little step. That's kind of like a fillet in here and a radius out here. But it also becomes what I would call a reflection line, which is where it would reflect something different in the environment. So this would reflect the sky. This part would be reflecting the ground. This part, there would be a horizon line somewhere through here. And so you would actually start to design with the reflection of the horizon. So you're actually, your design lines, okay, are actually reflections of the environment. And those are the things, so then this has to be basically vertical here to hold the horizon there. And so you start to calculate where those things will show up. So when I do my little car sketch like that, center line, okay, I'm thinking about this. This is actually, that little shape right there is actually the reflection of a little fender flare, and then fades into here, and then we could keep going if we want. And we could come down, back up, and then maybe back up here for the tail. So that would be a reflection line. So you're actually using you're drawing the edge of a strong reflection that's in the environment. So something like a horizon line. So like this. Now, you could also reflect, if you're in an indoor environment, maybe you put a reflection line of an overhead light box or something. So you could actually start to draw big reflection lines. We've all seen this one, a ball or an eyeball, and there's an overhead skylight that's reflecting on this, and then maybe it's got even the cross structure in the middle of it. So that's also a reflection line. Okay, I think that covers it. Check my list. Yep, that's it. So lines, 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 all sorts of them. Hope that helps clear up. That was somebody suggested that I do a tutorial on that from my Instagram account. So If you are following me on there and you would like certain topics covered, then just chime in, make a suggestion. I thought that was a good one. The line weight one was obviously talking a lot about silhouette and weight, and not specifically about the different types that you're going to see in a variety of drawings. So hopefully that explains it, and you start to incorporate some of those into your own line work. Always remember to have some variation, meaning the variation between the different line types. I usually go in order of silhouette, strongest. Silhouettes and overlaps are connected and both very strong. Cut lines, shut lines are strong. Part line and assembly line are maybe just a little bit lighter than cut and shut. Contour and section are very, very light. And then graphic lines and design lines can be about equal to a part line or a cut line. And reflection, I usually do quite light. And fillet radius, also very light. Okay, hope that helps. And again, thanks for your support and letting people know about this channel. Bye-bye.